the ancient empire of Babylon, power changed hands like shifting sand, yet one truth remained constant. The kingdoms of men rise and fall, but the God of heaven stands forever. After the fall of Babylon, a new ruler sat on the throne, King Darius of the Medo-Persian Empire. His kingdom stretched wide, filled with provinces, officials, and complex laws designed to keep order across vast lands. To govern such a realm, Darius appointed administrators and high officials, men responsible for overseeing wealth, justice, and stability. Among them stood Daniel, a Hebrew exile who had served faithfully through multiple reigns. Daniel was not merely intelligent. He carried integrity like armor. He did his work with excellence, neither bribed nor careless. And because of this, Darius planned to elevate him above the others, placing him in a position of highest authority. But honor invites envy. The moment Daniel began to rise, whispers began to spread through palace corridors. Other officials, threatened by his reputation and fearful of losing influence, watched him closely. They searched for a weakness, a scandal, a flaw in his service that could discredit him. Yet Daniel gave them nothing. His accounts were clean. His decisions were fair. His conduct was beyond accusation. The men grew frustrated because Daniel's character was the very thing that made him untouchable. And so their jealousy became more dangerous. When people cannot defeat righteousness through evidence, they often attempt to defeat it through traps. The officials gathered in secret and formed a plan. They knew Daniel's strength was his devotion to God. He was faithful not only in public work, but in private worship. Daniel prayed daily, opening his windows toward Jerusalem, remembering the city of his people and the covenant of his God. His prayer was quiet but consistent, a rhythm of faith that did not change with political climate. The officials decided to turn Daniel's devotion into a weapon against him. They approached King Darius with flattering words, appealing to pride. They suggested a new decree. For 30 days, no one should pray to any god or man except the king. Anyone who disobeyed would be thrown into a den of lions. The decree sounded like loyalty and unity, a way to strengthen the king's authority. But beneath the surface, it was a trap designed for one man. Darius, believing the proposal was wise and impressed by the devotion his officials displayed, signed the decree and sealed it with royal authority. In the law of the Medes and Persians, once a decree was sealed, it could not be changed. The trap had been set, and the officials waited for Daniel to stumble into it. When Daniel heard that the decree had been signed, he did not panic. He did not gather supporters. He did not attempt to fight the law with politics. Instead, he did what he had always done. He went to his house, opened his windows toward Jerusalem, and knelt in prayer. Daniel's decision was not reckless rebellion. It was faithfulness. He understood that worship belongs to God alone, and no earthly ruler could take that place. His prayer continued as usual, calm and steady, as if the decree had no power to rewrite the order of heaven. The officials rushed in, catching Daniel in the very act they hoped to expose. They did not speak to him with compassion. They pointed and accused, and then they ran to King Darius with their evidence. In the king's court, they reminded Darius of the decree he had signed, and they declared that Daniel had violated it by praying to his God. Darius felt the truth strike him like an arrow. He had been manipulated. The decree that was meant to magnify his authority was now set to destroy the man he trusted most. Darius tried to save Daniel. He questioned the officials. He searched for a loophole. He spent the day wrestling with the law, but the officials pressed him hard, reminding him that the decree could not be altered. As the sun began to set, Darius faced the moment no king wants, the realization that his own signature had become an instrument of injustice. Daniel was brought forward. Guards escorted him through torchlit halls and stone passages toward the lion's den. The den was a pit of darkness, sealed with iron and stone, its depths echoing with the presence of predators kept for punishment. Daniel walked calmly, not because he believed lions were harmless, but because he believed God was greater. At the entrance, Darius spoke to Daniel with sorrow and hope, expressing confidence that Daniel's God could deliver him. Then Daniel was lowered into the den. Shadows moved below. Lions paced in the dim, their eyes catching the flicker of torchlight. A massive stone was rolled over the opening, sealing Daniel inside. The king placed his signet seal upon the stone, ensuring that no one could secretly alter what had been decreed. The den was closed. Darkness swallowed the scene. Yet outside the den, another struggle began, not in stone, but in the king's conscience. Darius returned to his palace, but no music could comfort him. No feast could distract him. The king refused food and spent the night in unrest, staring into darkness as candles burned low. He had power, yet he was powerless against the law he had signed. In that long night, the palace that glittered with wealth felt hollow. Meanwhile, inside the den, Daniel faced the silence of the pit and the unseen breathing of lions. The story does not describe Daniel's fear, yet it is impossible to imagine the moment without feeling the weight of it. A man alone, in darkness, surrounded by lethal creatures, with no human rescue possible. But Daniel was not truly alone. As he approached the sealed pit, he called out with trembling hope, asking if Daniel had been delivered by his God. The stone was moved, and light poured into the darkness. And then the impossible was seen. Daniel was alive. He stood unharmed inside the den. The lions were there, but they were calm, as if restrained by an unseen command. Daniel answered the king with peace, explaining that God had sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths, and that no harm had been found in him, because he was innocent before God and before the king. Darius was overwhelmed with relief. He ordered Daniel to be lifted out of the den at once. Ropes were lowered. Daniel rose into the morning light, and officials examined him, finding no injury. The Empire watched a living testimony. Faith had triumphed over fear, and God had proven himself greater than imperial law and lethal judgment. The men who had plotted against Daniel were exposed. Their scheme had not only failed, it had revealed their corruption. Darius responded with decisive action, and judgment fell upon the plotters, their downfall implied as a warning against envy and deception. But the story's greatest moment was not punishment. It was proclamation. Darius wrote a new decree and sent it throughout the empire, declaring that all people should tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God whose kingdom will never be destroyed, whose dominion endures forever. The king's words echoed the reality. Daniel had lived. Earthly power is temporary, but God's authority is eternal. Daniel continued to prosper under Darius and those who followed, his life becoming a symbol of unwavering devotion in a world that demanded compromise. The story of Daniel in the lion's den endures because it speaks to every generation that has faced pressure to bend its conscience. It is a story about integrity under surveillance, faith under threat, and peace in the presence of fear. Daniel did not survive because he was fearless. He survived because he trusted. He did not win because he was violent. He won because he was faithful. The lions were real. The law was real. The danger was real. But above all of it, God was real. And when the world demanded silence, Daniel prayed. When the world demanded submission, Daniel remained loyal. When the world sealed him in darkness, God brought him into light. That is why Daniel's story is more than a miracle tale. It is a testimony that righteousness is not wasted, that prayer is not powerless, and that faith can stand firm even when the strongest systems of men attempt to crush it. The den was meant to be Daniel's end, but it became the stage for God's deliverance. And the message still rings through history. The living God is able, and those who trust him are never truly alone.